you know, from the time you were born till the time, just
For some
last,
of us, it's a longer story.
that's true. Yours is longer than my story. So,
Right, kid.
so basically, I think what we're just looking for is a little bit of an introduction to your spiritual story, you know, so that we can get to know how God has introduced himself to you and how you've journeyed with him on that journey. I'm not sure which one of you wants to start first.
I'm not following him.
Okay, then I will let you go first. I will sit over here and I'll just...
Hold my hand. I was telling somebody that you rehearse it in your mind when you're laying in bed, and then it just falls apart when you're up here in front of everybody so close. So, okay, so I was brought up in a home that we attended church every week. I was involved in the girls' club, all the choirs from little to old, and just had a wonderful childhood. But interesting, figuring it out when I got older, that my parents never talked about making a commitment to the Lord. I don't remember the church ever saying that, maybe I wasn't listening. And then it was kind of, I guess you call it a tradition when you're in high school, is when you become baptized. Go through a few classes, and so grade 10 I got baptized. And again, I never heard the terminology, commit yourself to the Lord. So that's what I did, and I got baptized. And I remember on a Good Friday service, my youngest brother, who's 7 years older than me, he asked me that morning before Good Friday service about accepting the Lord, and I did. And I remember crying and crying and crying. I remember my mom getting upset at me, "Why are you crying? We're going to church." But then I remember saying to him, "Oh, I don't want to change my life. I'm having a good time. You know, I wasn't a partier. I didn't get in trouble. Why, right?" And so I went to the Good Friday service. In grade 11 and 12, nothing changed. I went to a private high school, Bible school. I moved away, 45 minutes away, and attended a school for grade 11 and 12. Again, had a wonderful, wonderful time, great school. No one ever, what would you say, mentored me, which I think I needed. And so then graduated, went on to, this was Saskatchewan. Then I moved to BC, Abbotsford, BC, and I attended a Bible school there for a year and a half. And that's when my life started to change. Oh, wonderful people. And that's when I heard about living for the Lord. And that's where my life started to take off. My Christian walk with the Lord started to take off. And then probably a few years after that, I met Steve. And all that. No, and then we had a great group of friends. It was good, and I feel we were mentored by older people within the church that we attended after we were married, and that's part of it. And then, so to get more personal part of my life, I guess the beginning was I had 3 miscarriages. I had 2 before our first daughter. I just wanted a daughter. Even if I had 1 child, I'd be happy, and I got my daughter. But I had 2 miscarriages before that, so I felt we had children later in life. And then I had 1 in between her and our 2 boys. So it was hard. I mean, because you think you're not going to have kids, but if that's what the Lord wanted, you deal with what comes to you. But it all worked out, right? Got 3 beautiful kids. So the kids, Sydney's 20, Dustin's 17, grade 11, and Bryce is grade 9, he's 15. Another defining part of my life was my mother passed away in 1999. She was 64. She was vibrant, and we were best friends. And it was a time in my life we had moved back to Saskatchewan, and I was an adult, and now I could have adult time with my mom, not youth, child time with your mom. It was adult coffee time, and didn't get that. Sydney was 2, so I didn't have my kids did not have grandparents, because my dad isn't, anyway. And his parents were in BC. So my kids never had grandparents, really, around. So I feel bad that they never had that experience. So that was hard. And what brings a verse to do with that part is 1 Corinthians 10:13, where, and you've probably maybe heard this, is God will not put you things you cannot handle. Because I was just amazed how my best friend died and how I got through it. I didn't fall apart. It was, and I know it's attributed to the Lord. I know that for sure. Like Steve and I sang "Amazing Grace" at her funeral. Like, it's amazing how you can just sing without falling apart. Another defining part of my life was my youngest son is autistic, and pretty much right away, it's every daily is a struggle. I love him, and he's a wonderful boy, but it is very difficult with behavior and every parent wants their child to have friends and be happy. Really, we want them to follow the Lord. You want them to be happy and have friends, and he doesn't have all of that. So, to my understanding, that I want him to have, probably in his world he is happy, right? And so, and I'm amazed that that all things work together for good. Romans 8:28. Because a year ago it was a lot worth the price. You get different aspects in your child's lives as they grow up. Teenagers are different than a 5-year-old. But I can see how I have learned patience and how the Lord has been with me through this whole time and will continue to bless me with everything in his life and our lives. Okay.
I have to follow that. That's real.
Want me to hold your hand?
I want a hug. By the way, the first thing I need to know is somebody provided something here at a potluck that you never see at a potluck, and yet I loved it. And I went up for seconds, and there wasn't any left. It was what are those little green Brussels sprouts? Who brought the Brussels sprouts?
Nobody likes Brussels sprouts.
My mother made me Brussels sprouts every birthday. That was my birthday, part of my birthday. Who said what? I didn't get liver. But I did get Brussels sprouts, and I love it.
So, sometimes some information is too much information.
That's okay, we'll hang on. So thank you. So I was born in a very loving family in Vancouver. I'm the son of a pastor who pastored for 45 years, actually 50-some years. My grandfather was also a pastor. That's my mother's dad. He was a pastor in the United States for 60-some years. He had actually planted a church in Vancouver, and this young Canadian boy came there, and that was my dad. He got saved, met the pastor's daughter, and they got married, and he ended up pastoring in the Fellowship Baptist churches for many, many years after that. Very loving family, but I was the middle kid out of 5. Being a pastor's kid, there's a stereotypical thinking of how pastors' kids turn out. And that's not always true, but I did tie into that. That was me. I was the kid who walked away from the Lord early. Didn't want anything to do with Jesus Christ. I made a decision. Actually, I made about 100 decisions growing up as a kid. Maybe some of you have been in that position where you know the gospel message. It's been shared to you and with you, and you've heard it. You believe it, but you're not living it. And then all of a sudden you realize that Jesus is coming back like a thief in the night, and that means at night. So when I'm in bed, I'm thinking and afraid that he's going to come back, so I ask him in my heart again. And that happened about 100 different times growing up. So it didn't really take, I guess you can say, and I didn't grab a hold of it growing up. So in my high school years, I was definitely walking away from the Lord. It was very obvious. And so I had some troubles with authorities, I had some trouble with schools. I ended up getting popped around to a couple of different schools as well, for a variety of different reasons. Graduated, and barely, and but interestingly enough, I had a very good relationship with my sister, who is 2 years older than I am. And she influences, or has a lot of influence in my life, and she convinced me to go with her to a Bible school in Alberta. I had wanted to go to university, study history. Some of you know, and through our conversations, that I'm a history buff, and I was wanting to study history, and eventually I would love to teach history in school. And so one of the things that my grandfather had done is he was has a doctorate in history, but it's Bible history, ancient biblical history. And I thought, well, that could be an avenue. And so my sister had convinced me, go to school with me for at least 1 year. So I went to a little Bible school in Three Hills, Alberta, called Prairie Bible Institute. And anybody heard of Prairie? Okay. Yes. And so when I got there, at that time, you had to cut your hair above the ears and above the collar. I mean, look at me now. I mean, I'm almost bald anyways. But back then, that was a big deal. So I handled it 1 year and ended up starting a degree, and realized that that it was interesting enough for me to finish it. But here's the thing. You might not realize this, but there are many, many young people, for that matter, older people, that will attend Bible school that are not followers of Jesus Christ. You can know everything about Jesus, but not know Jesus. And that's the place I was at. And what happened to me, because I decided to finish my degree, I got so burnt out by this Christianese stuff that when I finally graduated, because I made sure I graduated, and in fact I hated it so much, hanging around these Christian people, that I finished a 4-year degree in 3 years. I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to get out of here. And so I did. I finished it in a Baptist Bible school in Vancouver. So what happened, though, was during that season, I walked away. When I was done, I walked away from anything to do with Christ and living for Him. And I went back to, really, I'd call it, my high school mentality. Trying to find success and happiness in any which way but through Christ. And financially, I was doing pretty good. I enjoyed that part of life, but I was also enjoying another part of life too that's not Christ honoring. I had a friend who was also a pastor's kid, who had also walked away from the Lord. He had got in trouble with he got into cocaine addiction and trafficking a little bit as well, and he had got in trouble with some guys who he owed money to and needed a place to hide out. So he came to my place, stayed, crashed on my couch. In the meantime, he got involved with a Cocaine's Anonymous group in a church in Vancouver, or in Burnaby. And when he was attending there, he got just fired up for Jesus. And he said, Steve, you got to come to this church. It's exciting. It's really a lot of fun. And I said, there's no way, Tori, I want to go. I go, you know what I think about Christians? They honestly, to be quite truthful, because of the place I was at, they made me physically sick. And so I didn't want anything to do with them. Finally, he convinced me enough. He said, listen, they like to debate. I could do that. I'm a pastor's kid. I'm in Bible school, actually. I have a degree. I could talk to some of these people under the table. And he says, and they got to keep girls. I was very curious. So, all for Jesus. So I went to this church in Burnaby, and that is where, for the first time in my life, I met people who had a real relationship with a real God. Now, the reason I say that I recognize that is because when I look back, I never recognized it in my dad's life. But my dad, as I look back, I realized, that's my dad. That's the guy that has had a relationship with Jesus Christ as I was growing up. And he became my hero in my life until he passed away. He'd be the guy I call all the time. And he would be the guy that, you know what, I would call him the Apostle Paul. That guy just reminded me of who the Apostle Paul must have been like. But bottom line was, I saw these people had this relationship with Jesus Christ, and I realized I'd been looking for peace all my life, and I kept pushing it away. It was there in front of me, and I kept pushing it away and trying to find it in other places and other ways. And I finally submitted my ego long enough to recognize that, submitted my life to Jesus Christ that day, or during that time. It was probably about 3 months in. And it was kind of crazy because a bunch of my friends, we were a bunch of wild guys, you know, crazy guys who were probably living, you know, ways that you wouldn't think are right. Well, I don't think are right. But we were excited about Jesus, and that's who Debbie met. And she thought we were crazy, and probably didn't want anything to do with us at the beginning. But over time, people stepped into our lives, and they mentored us and they discipled us. Some of them are friends to this day, and we thank the Lord for that. Soon after that, of course, Debbie and I connected and fell in love. I did, and we did get married, and we've been now married for going on in June. It'll be 28 years, right? 28 years, and 3 kids, as Deb said. Actually, 6 kids. 3 are in heaven, and the 3 here on earth with us. So that's our story, really, in a nutshell.
Good job.
And the emotional tears thing, like that fits in real well.
Yeah, did that work?
They're all about
She
that.
practices that a lot.
I think it just comes natural. So, share maybe a little bit about, so that's your spiritual story. Share a little bit about your pastoral journey. So, how did you come from going through Bible college? Because you didn't go right away after Bible college to become a pastor. So, what's sort of the high-level career journey that you were on that took you before you got to pastoral places?
So when I graduated, I obviously I wasn't in a right relationship with Jesus Christ, and so there was absolutely no way that I wanted to be a pastor. Nobody would have hired me anyways, but I did not want to be a pastor. I had seen the challenges that pastors go through anyways. My dad, as I said, had been a pastor. I have a brother who's a pastor. I have another brother who had been a pastor. My grandfather had been a pastor. So I'd seen the challenges that a pastor goes through. And by the way, support your pastors. Because they need your prayer, they need your support, they need your love, and they need your care. And so there was no way I was going to enter that. So I went back to BCIT, British Columbia Institute of Technology. I studied marketing. And
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
I'm a bit of an entrepreneurial guy as well. And so I, make a long story short, I ended up getting involved in the marketing side of things in the construction industry. When I was in Vancouver, I was working for a company as a sales guy. That's where I started, selling HRV systems, windows, doors, renovations. We brought in Lowen Windows. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They were a good friend who brought them and introduced them to British Columbia at the time. And enjoyed that. Then we moved to Saskatoon and ended up becoming the dealer rep for a company called Northern Fireplaces, which also included plumbing products, and we dealt with co-ops and Canadian Tires, and so I was the rep for Saskatchewan and for Northern Alberta, and loved it. And all the while we're doing this, though, Debbie and I were involved in churches, and I was involved in leadership, and we were involved in. Debbie is very much a mentor to especially young women, especially young married women, and so we were involved in some marriage things, some children things to help train in how to raise kids, those kinds of things like that, and also teaching and preaching in a variety of different ways. And so my role, I felt, was, with my experience as a pastor's kid and my experience through Bible school, I could come alongside and support the local pastor. And so I felt that was our ministry, and that was my ministry. Also, a guy in the corporate world can say things that a pastor can't say. And so I felt that there were many times I could be the voice. And I loved that role. I really cherished that role. So I would pray with our pastors, and I would encourage them, I'd send them notes, I would stand up for them at times if needed, if that was needed. I'd sometimes even challenge them at times if that was needed, but you do this in love and care. While I was doing that, though, I kept getting told by pastors and by others within leadership that you're actually a pastor. And I kept saying, no, I'm not. I'm not a pastor. I'm a pastor supporter. And so I continued on in this ministry, and it happened a few times, right, where I'd be told to write out a resume, and I even did that on a couple of occasions. Yeah, okay, here's my resume, and then I call them up about 2 days later, pull that resume out. It's not me, I'm not a pastor, I don't want to do this. And, but as time went on, I think that there was a pull along with a call, that this was a calling on our lives and our family's life, that I was to minister. I actually stepped out of the corporate world for a time with an organization called Leadership Ministries, and I ended up being the executive director for this organization, which was a ministry of leaders, business professional and political leaders in Canada. So I worked with the embassy, Canadian Embassy, also worked with the Legislative Assembly, and I worked with business people down in Bolivia mostly, and connecting dots and sharing Christ. But yet, that wasn't it. And I went back into the corporate world. I ended up being the National Vice President of Marketing for a company called Kela Group of Companies. And even there, it was just, there was this calling to minister to people. So we ended up hiring a chaplain for a company to work with. We had about 2,000 employees that would minister to these men that we were, mostly men that we were calling to build some of the buildings in other places to help them with their marriages and alcohol issues and things like that. And I remember one day, the CEO of the company, Daryl Ramey, said to me, you know what, Steve? He says, I think you're a pastor. That's not necessarily what I was wanting to hear at the time, but it was kind of another one of those affirmation pushes. So it was about a few months later, the pastor at a church that Deb and I had been at for 13 years, where we had been sent in Saskatoon by this church in many ways to the other side of Saskatoon where we lived to minister there, and we got involved in another church, called the pastor at the church on the west side of Saskatoon and said, you're looking for a pastor. He says, you've got to call Steve Savage. So Bruce Entz called, the pastor called Dwayne Bartman, and next thing I know I get a phone call from Dwayne, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'll have a coffee with you. And I think it was probably within that coffee time, do you remember? But it was pretty well soon after that was affirmed. It was just like a light bulb went off for me. Somebody flicked the switch and I realized, you know what? I think God is telling me that I got to move from being the supporter of a pastor, working from outside the church, to being somebody involved right inside on the trenches and in that pastoral role. And so soon after that, 2007, then we stepped into the pastoral role, and Daryl Ramey, the CEO, said, I was kidding. Too late then. So that has just been an affirmation and a growth affirmation. I asked my dad at one point, I said, how do I know that I'm called to pastoring, Dad? And he said, run away as fast as you can and as hard as you can. And he says, if God trips you up and brings you back, drags you back, he says, you know you're called. And that pretty much happened to us. And that has, over time, as I've been involved in pastoral ministry, now it's been close to 12 years, I guess, right? About 12 years? 10, 12 years? That has been affirmed more and more. It's become more of a passion each and every year for us.
How did you feel when you suddenly felt like he was being called to be a pastor? Did you feel all pastoral like him?
No.
What was your response?
I'm not going to be pastor's wife. I
Yeah.
like the corporate world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what did God have to do to change that in your mind?
Travel for less money.
No, it all just happened. I could see how I knew he needed to do that. I knew he was gifted for that, and that was God was calling him. So if God's calling him, then he's calling me.
Mm-hmm. It's been a good journey, right?
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Share how it came to be that you suddenly came across a job posting for a church in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and what your response was when you saw that.
Well, the reason you're asking that is because we actually together would never have imagined moving to Atlantic, Canada. In fact,
We never imagined moving to Ontario.
yeah, in fact, we started in Vancouver and we skipped a province, moved to Saskatchewan, or 2 provinces, and moved to Saskatchewan. And I was joking to somebody one time, yeah, but you know, we're not going to skip another couple of provinces and move to Newfoundland or someplace like that. I mean, come on. And here we are. in Nova Scotia. But it didn't, I didn't really believe that this was a legitimate option for us at the beginning. And, but it was about a year ago that we had stepped away from Port Ron, pastoring there. And we, and in fact, interestingly enough, one of the elders in the church had a business and so invited me, hey, well, while you're taking this time away, why don't you come and work for me and help me with the marketing? And so I did that. And interestingly enough, it was more of an affirmation that I was called to pastoring. I just,
Hated it.
you know what, I can do a good job at it, but I didn't like it. It's not who I am anymore, it's interesting. But that's, I think, because of the stamp of God on me. So I,
And the company burned down.
I did not, but a particular plant burned down. I didn't
Were
do
you
it.
in it? I know about things.
You know, can I tell you a real interesting God story out of that? It's a company I've actually worked with. I've been their chaplain in Saskatoon at their main plant. They have a plant in Saskatoon, Regina, and in Ontario. Well, not in Ontario anymore, but and the company's still up and running. But I had my Bible there by my desk because I'm pretty jealous about my Bible reading time, and I like to get there in the mornings and I like to read my Bible and just spend some time. And I put my eyeglasses on top of the Bible. Well, I can't remember what day it was. It was a Tuesday morning. I get a phone call that the place is on fire. We can't get near it. And it was like a 5-day fire. That's how bad it was. It's a rubber recollection plant, recycling plant. And so you can imagine all those rubbers. It's just terrible. And the fire ended up starting in the offices and where I had my desk, in fact, pretty close to it, right at the epicenter. So later on, though, it was about a week later, I was able to get back in there and I started digging around for some stuff. And I was very concerned because my Bible is pretty important to me, and big part, not just because it's the Word of God, but because I write a lot of notes in there. And so I had a few years of writing in that Bible. So I get upstairs and I'm looking through, rummaging, and pretty well everything's damaged completely. And I look over and I see my glasses, and so I pull them out, my reading glasses, so I pull them back up and I open it up and they're just absolutely trashed, sitting on top of my Bible. It's just gone. I look at the Bible and it's this charred black thing. So I picked that up. And I discovered all of a sudden that it's just simply the cover that's been black. Nothing, not even the sides of the pages have been touched by anything at all. I kept that Bible, I still have it, and I smell it once in a while. I took the cover off. And I go, you know what? God destroyed those glasses because that's man's way of trying to look at His Word, is how I see that. And He's saying, you know what? Put your eye on yourself and just, my Word will stand. My Word's eternal. Wow, what a picture that you get out of that. That was amazing. So that's a God thing. So, anyways, yes, I could have gone back to the company, but yeah, and it had burned down. It gave me a chance to leave. But then, you know what? I don't want to go back, and that's fine. They ended up downsizing anyways here in Ontario. What was I getting at? About here. So, about a year earlier, though, I had looked at this location. One of the associate pastors at the church I was at, youth pastor there, had been looking at the discipleship. I came across your discipleship curriculum, and he liked it. And so that had brought my attention to the church. And as I was looking at it as well, I realized, oh, you're looking for a pastor. But quickly, I discarded that, because there's no way we're living in Nova Scotia. And so I went back to looking at and connecting with some other churches. And probably, what, at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 churches that we said no to. Okay, there's a few churches we said no to. Nothing felt right. There's just, no. Interestingly enough, 1 or 2 of them were in our old hunting grounds, where we have many family and friends. But we just knew we couldn't go, and it hurt. It was difficult to say no to them. And I kept every once in a while coming back and taking a peek at LifeBridge. Finally, it was an evening after we had said no to some friends, because they were friends, the people we had grown up in our faith at the church. They knew us, we knew them, we loved them. And I had to say, no, it's tough, that's tough. And I'm sitting there on Thursday night. Okay, I'm gonna get choked up.
7 weeks ago.
7 weeks ago, and I looked at the church and I realized, and I just felt this strong sense, send a resume. And I remember thinking, no. And there was this urgency about it, send it now. So why send it now? I don't know. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to tell Debbie about this. Lord, I'm faithful to you. Now I'm done. I proved I'm faithful. So I sent it. It was the next morning, I got an email from this guy named Rob Lyadala or something. Would you be open to talk tomorrow? And that would be the Saturday. And I remember getting this email, and I'm thinking, oh shoot, I'm going to tell Debbie. What am I going to do? And so I had to tell her. And so I confessed, and it's easier
Well, you
to...
showed me the webpage and I looked at
I said, look at this place. I said, here's a church, Deb, that would like to talk to me tomorrow. Oh, really? I go, yeah, here's the website. And I tried to keep darting it down. That's it.
And what did I do?
Cried.
Oh, I freaked out.
You're taking away from my...
Family and my daughter.
Now, our daughter happened to be visiting at home that weekend, so that morning I went up to the upper room and had a conversation with Rob via Google Hangouts, and it was I thought it was a good conversation anyways. Meanwhile, Debbie and the kids are downstairs and they're talking about this, and so some stuff had happened while I was talking to Rob, because when I came downstairs, Deb's first comment was, before you say anything, I want you to know.
I'll be open to this or something.
I'll be open to going to...
Or
That
be
shocked me.
open to the possibilities.
Yes. So,
Just to give you a little side bit to that Thursday night when he felt this compelling need to send in his resume, that Thursday night was an elders meeting, and as you're aware, we've been looking at a lot of resumes, and we've been praying a lot as a church and as an elders board, and every elders meeting we've had since this time last year, we've come to and had anywhere from 4 to probably 8 resumes that we've discussed and looked at and prayed over, and things just haven't worked out. That particular night, we actually were probably a little frustrated, and so we decided, we looked at the few resumes that were there, nothing felt right, nothing seemed to be a congruent fit. We've also spent an inordinate number of hours watching sermons from different applicants, and quite often the unanimous response is the style just isn't LifeBridge, and we couldn't quite explain what that was, but we just knew that it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't God's leading. So that Thursday night, we actually had always dedicated time to praying, but we were praying a little bit more a frustrated prayer. It was more like, okay, God, like it's been closing in now on a year since we felt you calling us as a church to start the church plant in Eastern Passage and to reach out and post this job, and nothing's happening. So what is this all about? And so we just had this really intense sort of prayer time. Even Keith the next morning sent an email remarking about what a good prayer time it was. So while we're praying fervently and frustratedly,